and spirituality. Sudamaji's family strictly followed the Vedas and the path of Dharma. From childhood, he was taught prayers, meditation, and the duties of a Brahmin. That is why, from a very young age, Sudama's heart was drawn more toward devotion to God than toward worldly pleasures. While other children were busy enjoying games and comforts, Sudama remained calm, humble, and deeply interested in wisdom and spirituality. There was no greed within him, no anger, no pride. Poverty did not make his heart bitter. Instead, it made him even more simple and pure. It is said that Sudamaji was extremely content by nature. Even if he had no food for several days, not a single word of complaint would come from his mouth. But this raises an important question. If Sudamaji was such a pure and virtuous soul, then why did he suffer so much hardship? Why was such a beloved devotee of God born into poverty?
As time passed, the moment was drawing near, a moment that would change Sudamaji's life forever. In order to gain knowledge and wisdom, Sudamaji was sent to the ashram of the great sage Guru Sandipani. That ashram was not just a place of education, it was a center of discipline, devotion, and spiritual practice. There, princes and ordinary boys alike all lived the same simple life. And in that very ashram, another young student was already studying. His name was Shri Krishna. When Sudamaji met Shri Krishna for the first time, he had no idea that this friendship would one day become the greatest friendship the world had ever known. Slowly, the two became inseparable. They studied together, ate together, served together. Lord Krishna deeply loved Sudama's simple and pure nature, and Sudamaji was touched by Krishna's kindness and humility. One day, Guru Mata sent all the students into the forest to gather firewood. Krishna and Sudama went together as well. The two friends were busy collecting wood in the forest when suddenly a fierce storm and heavy rain began. Darkness covered the sky. Strong winds started blowing. The forest paths disappeared. But neither of them abandoned the other and ran away. The entire night they stood beneath a tree, completely drenched in the rain, still holding the bundles of wood in their hands so that their service to Guru Mata would not remain incomplete. The next morning, when Guru Sandipani came searching for them, he became emotional after seeing the devotion and dedication of his students. He said, "You both have shown the true meaning of service, sacrifice, and friendship." And then he blessed them, saying that their names would be remembered for ages to come. But another incident also took place in the ashram, an incident that deeply affected Sudamaji's life. One day, Guru Mata gave Sudama some roasted chickpeas to eat and told him to share them with Krishna on the way. When the two friends reached the forest, Krishna rested his head on Sudama's lap and fell asleep. Meanwhile, Sudama was extremely hungry. He thought to himself, "Krishna is asleep. I'll just eat a few chickpeas by myself." And slowly he began eating them alone. After some time, Krishna opened his eyes, smiled gently, and asked, "Sudama, what are you eating?" Sudamaji became nervous. He quickly replied, "Nothing, Krishna. My teeth are chattering because of the cold." Krishna knew everything, but he said nothing. With time, their education at the Gurukul came to an end, and now Sudamaji was about to enter a new chapter of his life. After receiving the blessings of Guru Sandipani, Sudamaji returned home. Sometime later, he married a virtuous and devoted woman whose name was Sushila. Sushila was not only his wife, she was his greatest support through every hardship. But even after marriage, Sudamaji's life did not become easier. Instead,
their poverty continued to grow worse. The condition of their home became so miserable that many times no food was cooked for days. Torn clothes, a broken hut, and hardship everywhere. Sudamaji was a Brahmin. He tried to support his family through alms and religious prayers, using whatever little he received. But often, even that was not enough. The most painful moments came when his small children cried from hunger. Sometimes there was not a single grain of food in the house, and the children had to sleep after drinking only water. Even as a father, Sudamaji was unable to satisfy the hunger of his children. Yet, despite such terrible poverty, he never complained to God. And his wife Sushila, she endured every difficulty with patience and faith. She knew that her husband was no ordinary man. She never insulted Sudamaji, nor did she blame him for their poverty. When there was no food in the house, she herself would remain hungry while trying somehow to feed Sudamaji and the children. There was pain in her eyes, but her faith in God never became weak. And Sudamaji, he had become the very symbol of contentment. He had no greed for wealth, no desire for palaces or luxury. He had accepted poverty as his destiny. He would always say, "Whatever God gives us is what is truly best for us."
Days continued to pass, but instead of improving, Sudamaji's poverty only grew worse. There was barely any food left in the house. The children cried from hunger, and Sushila was slowly breaking apart inside as she watched their suffering. One day, when there had not been a single grain of food in the house for many days, Sushila finally gathered the courage to speak to Sudamaji. She said, "Your friend is the king of Dwarka himself. He is no ordinary man. He is Lord Shri Krishna. If you go to meet him, perhaps our suffering may finally come to an end." But hearing this, Sudamaji immediately became silent. There was a deep hesitation in his heart. He replied, "True friendship should never be based on selfish desires. How can I go to Krishna just to ask for something?" For Sudamaji, Shri Krishna was not merely a king, he was his beloved friend, and that was exactly why he did not want to use their friendship for material gain. But on the other side, Sushila was watching the condition of their children. Once again she pleaded with him, "Do not go to ask him for wealth, simply go to meet your friend. The rest will happen according to God's will." Sudamaji understood that this was no longer only about his personal hesitation. It had now become a question of his family's survival. Finally, he decided to travel to Dwarka. But there was one problem. What could he possibly take as a gift for Shri Krishna? There was barely enough food for the family itself. So Sushila went from neighbor to neighbor, and with great humility she begged for a little flattened rice. Someone gave 1 handful, someone gave 2. After much effort, she was able to gather only a small amount. She tied the flattened rice in an old cloth, and while handing it to Sudamaji, she said, "This is a very small gift, but it carries our love." Holding that tiny bundle of flattened rice in his hands, Sudamaji became emotional. On one side was the magnificent wealth of Dwarka, and on the other, this tiny offering from a poor Brahmin. But perhaps he did not yet realize that for God, the value of a gift is not measured by wealth, but by the devotion and love behind it. Barefoot, wearing torn clothes, Sudamaji began his long journey. The road was difficult. Many times he had to remain hungry. Sometimes he slept beneath trees, and sometimes he walked for miles without water. But within his heart there was only one feeling, the joy of meeting his dear friend Shri Krishna after so many years. After many days of a difficult journey, Sudamaji finally arrived in Dwarka. The moment he saw the city, he stopped in awe for a few moments. Everywhere he looked, there were magnificent golden palaces, huge royal gates, shining streets, and unimaginable wealth in every direction. This was the sacred city of Krishna, where his childhood friend now lived as a great king. But in the middle of that glorious kingdom stood a poor Brahmin in torn clothes, barefoot, his body covered in dust, and in his hand a small bundle of flattened rice tied in old cloth. When the palace guards saw Sudamaji, they mistook him for an ordinary beggar. They asked, "Who are you?" Sudamaji humbly replied, "I am Sudama, the friend of Shri Krishna. We studied together in the Gurukul." The guards could hardly believe it. They thought, how could a poor Brahmin possibly be the friend of the king of Dwarka? But the moment this news reached inside the palace, everything changed. At that time, Shri Krishna was seated upon his royal throne. Queens, ministers, and soldiers surrounded him. But as soon as he heard the name Sudama, he immediately rose from his throne. Without a second thought, without caring about royal protocol, Krishna ran toward the palace entrance. The entire royal court was stunned by the sight. The king of Dwarka was running to welcome a poor Brahmin. And the moment Shri Krishna saw Sudamaji, his eyes filled with tears. The very next moment, he embraced his dear friend tightly. Two friends were meeting again after many years, yet the love between them had not changed at all. Sudamaji became so emotional that he could barely speak, and Krishna simply kept smiling as he looked at his beloved friend. Even the gods themselves became emotional watching that divine reunion between the Lord and his devotee. Then Shri Krishna personally held Sudamaji's hand and led him inside the palace. In the very place where great kings waited to receive honor, Krishna gave the highest respect to his poor friend. But what happened next left the entire palace in complete shock. Shri Krishna personally seated Sudamaji on a royal seat and began washing his feet with his own hands. The king of Dwarka was washing the feet of a poor Brahmin, and not only that, tears were flowing from Krishna's eyes. He considered even the dust from his friend's feet to be sacred. Meanwhile, Mata Rukmini watched this entire scene in amazement. She wondered, who is this simple Brahmin for whom the Lord himself is showing such immense love? Sitting inside the royal palace, Sudamaji felt deeply uncomfortable as he looked around at all the luxury. On one side stood a palace decorated with gold, and on the other, in his own hands, was that tiny bundle of flattened rice. Again and again he tried to hide it beneath his clothes. He felt that such a simple gift was not worthy of the king of Dwarka. But Shri Krishna understood everything. He could see every emotion hidden within his friend's heart. Suddenly, Krishna smiled and said, "Sudama, you brought something for me, didn't you?" The moment he heard this, Sudamaji became even more hesitant. Softly, he replied, "No, Krishna, it's nothing." But how could the Lord be convinced so easily? Immediately, Shri Krishna reached inside Sudama's cloth and pulled out the tiny bundle hidden there. And the moment he saw that it contained simple flattened rice, his face lit up with joy. Perhaps even the greatest treasures in the world could not have given the king of Dwarka the happiness that this tiny offering brought him. Because it was not merely flattened rice, it was the love of a poor friend. At once, Shri Krishna took a handful of the flattened rice and began eating it with immense love and happiness. There was the same joy in his eyes that once existed during their childhood days at the Gurukul. But it is said that with just that single handful of flattened rice, the Lord had already decided to remove all the poverty from Sudamaji's life forever.
Because God does not accept the value of the object, He accepts the devotion and love behind it. And just as Shri Krishna reached for a second handful, Mother Rukmini gently held his hand. With humility, she said, "My lord, with just one handful, you have already blessed him with the happiness of all three worlds. If you eat a second handful as well, then even we ourselves will have to become servants in his home." Hearing this, Shri Krishna simply smiled. And meanwhile, Sudamaji still understood nothing. He did not even realize how deeply his small offering had pleased the Lord.
After spending some time in Dwarka, the moment finally came for Sudamaji to return home. Shri Krishna had showered his friend with immense love and respect, but Sudamaji had not asked him for anything. Not for wealth, not for clothes, not for food, not even for relief from his family's poverty. And so he began his journey back home, with empty hands, just as he had arrived. But there was no sadness on his face, because he had not gone to Dwarka to seek riches. He had gone there to meet his beloved friend. Throughout the journey, only one thought kept running through Sudamaji's mind. My wife had sent me with so much hope, yet I could not bring myself to ask Krishna for anything. For a few moments, he felt as though he had failed his family. But the very next moment, a smile appeared on his face. He thought to himself, "I received the love of the Lord Himself. What greater treasure could there possibly be in this world?" Meanwhile, far away in Dwarka, Shri Krishna had already blessed his friend with his divine grace, but Sudamaji had no idea. After many days of travel, he finally reached his village, but the moment he came near it, he suddenly stopped in confusion, because nothing looked the way he had left it. Where there were once broken huts, now stood magnificent palaces. Everywhere there was greenery, servants, luxury, and a divine atmosphere. Sudamaji stood there in shock, thinking, "Have I come to the wrong place?" He walked forward slowly, but the closer he came to his home, the greater his amazement became. The small broken hut that once belonged to him had now transformed into a grand palace. Golden gates, servants dressed in rich garments, and endless prosperity all around. Sudamaji could not understand how any of this was possible. Just then, a radiant woman stepped out from inside the palace. At first, Sudamaji could not even recognize her, but the very next moment, he realized it was his wife, Sushila. The torn clothes she once wore were gone. The pain had disappeared from her face. Instead, there was a divine glow within her. Tears filled Sushila's eyes as she said emotionally, "All of this is the grace of your friend Shri Krishna." And at that very moment, Sudamaji understood. The Lord had given him everything without him ever having to ask. Krishna had not only removed his poverty, he had also protected the dignity of his friend. Tears began flowing from Sudamaji's eyes. He finally understood. There is no need to explain our pain to God. The Lord already knows every suffering hidden within the heart of his devotee. The same Sudama, who once did not even have a single grain of food, was now standing amidst unimaginable wealth. But the most beautiful thing was this. Even after receiving such riches, no pride entered his heart, and his devotion never weakened. That is why Sudamaji is remembered not only as the friend of God, but as one of the greatest symbols of true devotion, humility, and pure friendship. The story of Sudamaji is not just the tale of a poor Brahmin and his friendship with Lord Krishna.
Hidden within it are many deep spiritual mysteries, mysteries that very few people truly know. The biggest question is this: was Sudamaji really an ordinary human being? Because the person whom Lord Shri Krishna himself honored so deeply, whose feet the Lord washed with his own hands, how could such a soul be ordinary? Many Vaishnava scriptures and traditional legends say that Sudamaji was not merely Krishna's friend, he was a divine devotee eternally connected to the Lord's soul. The bond between Sudama and Shri Krishna was not limited to just one lifetime. It was a relationship carried through many births. According to some legends, Sudamaji had been a great devotee of Lord Vishnu in his previous lives. For many lifetimes, he performed deep penance and devotion, and because of that devotion, in this birth, he received the rare blessing of becoming the beloved companion of Shri Krishna himself. But then another question arises. Why did such a great devotee suffer poverty and hardship throughout his life? Many stories attempt to answer this mystery. One belief is connected to the incident in the Gurukul, when Sudama ate the roasted chickpeas alone. It is said that once a poor Brahmin woman had kept some chickpeas aside as an offering to Lord Vasudeva. But during the night, those chickpeas were stolen. Filled with sorrow and anger, the woman gave a curse. "Whoever eats these chickpeas meant for my Lord will suffer poverty throughout life." Later, those same chickpeas somehow reached Krishna and Sudama. But when Sudamaji learned that the chickpeas carried a curse, he thought to himself, "If my Lord Krishna eats these chickpeas, then the sustainer of the universe himself may suffer poverty. How could I ever allow that while I am here?" And so, without saying a word, Sudama ate all the chickpeas himself. Some traditions say that this became the reason for his lifelong poverty. But another belief says something even deeper, that all of this was part of the divine plan of God. God gave poverty even to his dearest friend, so the world could witness that a true devotee never turns away from God, even in the hardest circumstances. If this divine story touched your heart, then please make sure to like this video, so this beautiful story can reach more people. Do share your thoughts in the comments and tell us what inspires you most about Sudamaji.